Welcome to the Bearded Podcast. I'm the man with the plan, the man you got to stand, Jordan Crouton Moore. And I've got this right here. I got it this time. My wonderful fiance painted that for us. How awesome is that? The man with the plan, the man you got to stand. It's going to be hanging up back there within the next few probably days, or maybe I'll do it as soon as we get off the podcast. But nonetheless, we're back with some more Bearded Podcast. I finally got a mic stand for my mic again, so I don't have to hold it the entire time and you hear all my peas popping like crazy. But nonetheless, we're here. We've had a crazy week of football, week 18. We saw a lot of crap games, but we also saw some fun ones as well. And of course, I'm joined by the man to my left, rocking the Dallas Cowboys hat. We've got a fun game on Monday. Never beaten Tom Brady before. Could this finally be the time? Not sure. But Mr. Dylan Lowe, how are you feeling over there? And are you excited for Wild Card Weekend, Super Wild Card Weekend?
I mean, yeah, it's playoff time. I think this was quite an underwhelming NFL regular season, so I'm hoping the playoffs make up for it. And in terms of the Cowboys, I mean, I want to say I'm excited, but I also don't want to let myself down for the 10th year in a row. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll talk about that game, but thank God the playoffs are finally here. We need some more exciting football, in my opinion.
I think so too. We just saw, of course, we'll talk about this for just a second. We just saw some of the most exciting college football games of the year, leading into probably one of the most underwhelming games I've ever watched in my entire life. And I only watched half of it, so I'm actually kind of glad I only watched half of it because I think I probably would have fallen asleep if I would have watched the whole thing. So let's jump into that with some college football. We're going to talk a little bit about the national championship game that happened last Monday between Georgia and TCU. I think everybody, including the two of us, were hoping to see a little bit more of a competitive game, but instead we got the biggest blowout in championship history with Georgia taking it to TCU. I mean, it was just embarrassing for TCU. Max Duggan did not have a good game at all. That whole offense just looked incredibly sluggish. And that defense, I don't know how they were able to contain Michigan like they were 2 weeks ago. So what are you thinking, Dylan? What did you think about that game? I know you watched a good amount of it. What did you think about it? What did you see from those players? And what did you see from Stetson Bennett, who's obviously going to be going into the draft, who's older than most starting quarterbacks right now in the NFL?
I think, this I guess this upcoming season will be the last year of the 4-team at least. So maybe that'll help things out a little bit in terms of avoiding games like this when it comes to the national championship at least. But the committee really should have stuck to their own guns where they consistently say, we want to get the best 4 teams in. If you got the best 4 teams in, Alabama was in this playoff and not TCU. So, I know TCU beat Michigan and whatnot, and it is weird, what does that say about Ohio State that TCU was able to contain, Michigan? And then, this is my thing with that, actually. This goes to show, one of the worst, things anybody can say when trying to validate whether one team is better than the other is, oh, this team beat that team and they beat this team, so they're better. You know what I'm saying? So people, you cannot say that when it comes to, Ohio State this year, TCU, whatever, Georgia, because it's TCU beat Michigan. Michigan beat Ohio State, but Ohio State gave Georgia way more of a shot than TCU did. They in fact should have won the game. So that logic never has added up in my head. I think that's some of the worst logic you can use when comparing teams. But regardless, Georgia does it. Stetson Bennett, he's in a weird category because you read off the achievements he's led this team to have, such as back-to-back national titles, the SEC. He's an SEC champion, this and that. He was a Heisman finalist, but it's I wouldn't even Joel Klatt said this. I wouldn't even start him with some of Georgia's past quarterbacks in recent years, that did the national championship. Would you start him over Aaron Murray? No, definitely not. So he's just in a weird spot. I mean, this will at least get him probably drafted, in the later rounds of the draft. He'll definitely have his time to, if Trace McSorley's getting his chance in the NFL at some point. This guy's the definition of a college quarterback. And, sorry to say he played well enough, obviously, but he had 6 total touchdowns against TCU. You can't discredit him, but it's more so like, look what Kirby Smart gave him. He gave him the keys to an insane team for 2 years in a row. So, but I got to give credit where it's due. I think the national championship was played New Year's Eve rather than this past Monday.
I think so too.
It is what it is. So Georgia is your national champions for the second year in a row.
Hey, and congratulations to them. They had a really good team. They had a great defense. They had a good quality offense. And I think that, next year when looking at the outlook for that team, with Stetson Bennett moving on, like, is that a better offense? I think that that's something we got to look at, because obviously Stetson Bennett is a good quarterback. He's a good college quarterback, but obviously he didn't have the most raw talent in the world. He doesn't have that developmental trait that a lot of quarterbacks have. So, is Georgia better off getting one of those 5-star guys that they know is going to have that athleticism, that's going to have that explosion? And could we see another Georgia playoff scenario next year? I think that that's another important thing to look at. But let's go ahead and jump in, Dylan. Let's talk about our way too early predictions for college football playoff next year. I think there are some really good teams next year that are going to have a lot of things flowing how you want them to flow. Maybe you're going to be right on that cusp of breaking out into the next year. So, Dylan, what are you thinking? College football playoffs next year, last year of 4 teams, which is incredible because – goodness gracious, I'm so ready for that 12-team playoff to start. It's going to be so exciting for all those weeks. And, of course, last year, 4-team playoffs. Who you got making the playoffs? Give me those 4 teams right now.
I think there's a surprise of nobody. I'm going to have to put Ohio State in there. I think it's going to be a tougher regular season than we've seen in the past. I think, going to Notre Dame is going to be a tough one. At Indiana, I feel like we could start slow. It's Ohio State's, go-to is to start slow.
Yeah.
We're going to have a first-year quarterback, which does usually scare me, and that's, the logic I'm going to use here in a second. But in terms of Ohio State, I don't think it's too hard considering we're in the Big Ten. I think you beat Michigan, you're well on your way. If we can beat Notre Dame, which I think will be actually harder than people are expecting, and if we can obviously go to Michigan and beat Michigan, which I don't see us losing 3 years in a row, knock on wood, but – it looks like Ohio State has a good shot to go to the playoff. Alabama, I think Alabama gets back in there just because, and they have they're going to have a first-year quarterback as well. But, I thought it took a lot of balls for what David Pollack did the other day, sitting right next to Nick Saban on live television saying that the Georgia Bulldogs are taking over the SEC, which he wasn't necessarily wrong at that point in saying that. And he's a former Georgia player, so of course he's going to say that. But Buddy might have woken up a beast out of Nick Saban, so I'm going to throw just off of that. I think some of the outside teams, I'm going to throw in maybe like an Oregon because it's like, this always happens. Sometimes Pac-12 teams can sneak through. There's teams from the Pac-12 that like they should run the table, but more oftentimes than not, they don't run the table. They lose to somebody they shouldn't lose to. In fact, Oregon was, they had a real shot at making it this past year, even after that loss to Georgia, but they ended up dropping a game to like Washington where they looked pretty bad. So, but I'm going to throw Oregon in there. They've got Bo Nix coming back. He's like in a Stetson Bennett situation where he's been in college for the last 10 years and be good after the Georgia game this year. So I think he can go in and do something with this offense and be a dynamic quarterback for them, which the Oregon offense is always needed. And then they've got Dan Lanning, a defensive head coach who's been killing it really in recruiting. So
absolutely.
Make it out of the Pac-12. I think they actually might have a better chance next year of making it out than not Georgia, but he does.
Oh, really?
But as much as a fan as I am of Caleb Williams, he can't be the whole team, as we saw against the game against Tulane. So, I'm going to throw Oregon in there, and for the 4th team, like I'm really not sure. I'm genuinely not sure. I guess you could place Georgia in there. I think they'll be competing at least, but again. First-year quarterbacks scare me, especially when you're in a conference like the SEC. So losing all the talent that they've lost specifically on the defensive side of the ball and 2 years in a row and bouncing back 2 years in a row is going to be pretty difficult. So I don't know. We'll see what happens though. But I'm going to say Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama as of right now. But this will definitely change.
Hey, I like the list, man. I like it a lot. I was also thinking about Oregon too, with Bo Nix coming back. I know he's a quarterback that's like, got a lot of, he's got a lot of negatives about him too, but he did look really good at the end of last season with the Ducks. But for my four teams, I think I'm going to go Alabama because I actually think this is something I'm going to say. I think that this is going to be the first year in a while that we're going to have no undefeated teams in the playoffs. I think that every single team that's going to make the playoffs this year is going to have at least one loss. I think that's SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, whoever it is. I think no one's going to get in with a flawless record this next year. Even some of these teams that have perceivably easier schedules than other teams, I think that they're going to have some challenges in their road as well. That's going to make it so that not anybody's going to come into this playoff undefeated, which I think is going to be a lot more competitive and a lot more fun. But give me Alabama, give me Georgia. I think those two guys, even though they're going to have first-year starters at quarterback, I think that Georgia's a little bit less proven than Alabama is whenever it comes to their first-year quarterback play. Georgia struggled in the past with being able to pick up quarterbacks and just flawlessly insert them into that Kirby Smart system. So that's what worries me a little bit about Georgia. I think they might drop a game or two, and I think Alabama's going to drop a game as well. But I still think Alabama will come in at that number one seed just because I think their team is really solid and really good for next year. And then I'm looking at the Big Ten teams. I'm looking at a Michigan with a returning running back and quarterback. They've got that good setup there. They got some returning wide receivers. They've got some returning defensive pieces, even though they are going to be losing a good amount. And I really like Michigan next year. And I think I might take Michigan over Ohio State. I know that's going to kill you. I know that's going to kill Tyler, but that's just my personal opinion. I think that this is going to come down. I think it's going to be those two teams once again, like it always is. And I think it is going to be one of those two guys. I could see both of them or one of them coming in undefeated or with one loss going into that game. And I think it's really, really going to be tough and to call that game. And I think I think it's going to be one of those two teams into the playoffs. But if I had to give an edge, it would be Michigan just for the experience side. I think it also depends on if they keep their coach. That's another pretty big thing if he goes and joins the NFL and that coaching carousel that's going to be going on too, because there are a few jobs that are going to be a little more desirable than others in the NFL, to say the least, coming up next year. And then for that last spot, I think there are a couple of teams that you could look at. I think Oregon's a good call. I think USC is a good call because, even though Caleb Williams can't do everything himself, like you said, like we saw against Utah, like we saw against Tulane, I think also he's Caleb Williams. He's the Heisman winner from last year. He's a really good player. So I think you can't count him out just off that. And then I'm going to throw in another name that, maybe people aren't thinking about as much. I'm going to throw in a basketball school. Give me North Carolina with Drake May. I think Drake May is going to have a huge breakout season next year. I like him to be a Heisman finalist, and I think that he's going to do that on course to getting North Carolina a really, really good season. So that's my kind of prediction right there. I think Texas is going to be good next year. I think that we're going to see a bounce back year from Arkansas. I don't think playoff good, but I think maybe top 10 good. I think Oklahoma is going to have another bounce back year. So, I think there are a couple teams that are going to have pretty decent seasons, but I think that if you had to knock it down to four, I think you've got Georgia, Alabama, either Big Ten, either Ohio State or Michigan, and then somebody like an Oregon or North Carolina or USC.
Fair enough. I mean, all valid at the moment.
Everything's valid right now because we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in transfer portal. We don't know all of this kind of stuff. People still declaring, undeclaring, doing all that jazz. But let's move on from the college world to the NFL. And Dylan, we got playoff football. I'm so excited for playoff football. Stakes are high. All these teams in here to play. Last week in Week 18, we had a lot of teams getting eliminated. Pittsburgh finishing with a winning season, although they don't make the playoffs. Skylar Thompson and the Miami Dolphins make it instead. And, of course, neither the Lions or the Packers make it into the playoffs after the Lions were able to beat the Packers at Lambeau last weekend. So, a lot of really interesting teams here. We've got some cool games, some teams that I didn't think were going to make the playoffs at the beginning of the year, one of those being Seattle. I mean, I was looking at that team saying they're going to be the worst team in the league. And look at that. They're in the playoffs. Somehow Geno Smith has led them here. But before we talk about the playoffs, let's talk about some awards. How does that sound? You ready to jump into this and talk about some winners, some favorites, all of that jazz with the NFL? Of course, these are regular season awards, but let's talk about our picks. Let's go first with NFL Coach of the Year. Whenever you look at this, I think there are 3 clear number 1 picks that you could really go with. Maybe 4, honestly, if you're looking at it. And that's 100% reflected here in the odds to win. Right now, if you're going and you want to bet, you're actually going to lose some bets. You're at a minus 175 if you pick Nick Sirianni to win Coach of the Year, of course, coach of the Eagles. Then, of course, you've got Kyle Shanahan, who was able to come in and do a lot with little, and as little as having Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback and still make the playoffs at a good seed. Then you've got the 2 big guns that I think you could really put some money on and might make some with Brian Daboll and Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson at plus 1800 or plus 800, and Brian Daboll at plus 1400. So, Dylan, what are you thinking here? NFL Coach of the Year, which one of these guys deserves it?
I'm going to just say Nick Sirianni. I mean, I think they're going to give it to him with, the best record and number 1 seed in the NFL. So, and compared to where they were last year, where they weren't even division champions, he's taking Jalen Hurts and put him in MVP conversation. So I think that's a pretty easy one. I think it's going to Nick Sirianni, unfortunately.
I think so too, although if I was giving out the award personally, I would probably give it to Doug Peterson. I think what he was able to do with that Jaguars team, it's very much the same team that they had last year, just with Christian Kirk, got a few pieces on the offensive line. But other than that, I mean, this team is what Urban Meyer had last year, and he turned that team from a 2-3 win team into a playoff contending team who's going to be hosting a playoff game. They won their division. I think that he kind of needs some credit, and I think that he's being very undervalued at plus 800 right now for Coach of the Year odds. But I also think that Nick Sirianni is going to win.
I might have to throw like $10 on like a plus like 30 million odds with Nathan.
Yeah, that would be close. I think you really might get it. You could throw some money on Mike McCarthy too, or maybe Cliff Kingsbury. Let those guys get some work in there as well. But let's move on here. We've got Comeback Player of the Year. This is a very interesting one, but I think there are some really good calls, and it's hard for me to personally pick from the top 3 of these players, and I don't know who I would go with. But let me read them out to you, and you can give me your thought process here, Dylan. We've got Saquon Barkley and Geno Smith tied for the odds-on favorites to win Comeback Player of the Year. Of course, Geno Smith leading the Seattle Seahawks to a playoff berth, and Saquon Barkley leading the Giants to a playoff berth. And then you've got Christian McCaffrey, who's coming back and had a phenomenal season with the 49ers. And if you really want to reach, you've got Jared Goff at plus 700 and Derrick Henry at plus 8,000. So want to throw $1 on plus 8,000 and get a couple dollars for you. I mean, that might be nice to look at too.
I'm going to definitely take – that surprises me that Derrick Henry's that low, but I'm going to take Geno Smith. I think, unfortunately, awards are going to lean towards quarterbacks, but this one rightfully so. Like,
absolutely.
Given the situation, he was in a quarterback battle with Drew Lock before the season started, and everybody wrote the Seahawks off because they got rid of Russell Wilson, and now it's Geno Smith. So that means they're tanking, but he actually has them still playing here in the middle of January. So
yeah,
I've got to give it to Geno Smith there. He definitely didn't write back. So
he definitely did it, and I think he should win Comeback Player of the Year for that quote exclusively, because that was cold. That was week 1 that happened, and you were like, damn, this guy's here. Like he's here. That was crazy with Geno Smith, but I think I'm going to go different from you. I think I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley here. He had a really bad season last year. Injuries really plagued him, of course. And then you had, bad play whenever he was on the field. But he really came back. He was the anchor for this Giants offense. He was the one that allowed that play action to open up that so well favored Brian Daboll's offense. And, I really feel like Saquon Barkley deserves Comeback Player of the Year. This is a quarterback award. A lot of these awards are, and I think Geno Smith deserves it just as much as Saquon Barkley. But, for sake of going different than you, I'm going to go Saquon Barkley because I can really see both of these guys coming away with the award.
Okay.
Let's move on to some rookies, baby. Let's move on probably to the easier of the two to pick. Let's do Defensive Rookie of the Year first. My pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year, might I add, Mr. Sauce Gardner at minus 1,200 to win Rookie of the Year. I mean, he came in and he has not been a good corner. He has been a lockdown top corner. You do not want to go against this Jets defense because of Sauce Gardner. And I think he definitely deserves Defensive Rookie of the Year.
I'm going to take him too, but you got to give an honorable mention here to Aiden Hutchinson.
Absolutely. Absolutely, you do. And, that there have been some good defensive players, too, the defensive rookies that have also shown off. I think Woolen has been a pretty good one. And, you've got to look at Kyle Hamilton, who honestly had a pretty good season with the Ravens as well. So I think those two guys also very, very good. But, Sauce has just been above and beyond the best defensive player in this draft. It hasn't even been close so far. Let's move on. Offensive Rookie of the Year. We've got some interesting picks here. We've got your Garrett Wilson right now, who's at minus 200, who is the odds-on favorite. But I honestly think that that's being pretty generous because I think there are some players that could come in here and really surprise. Kenneth Walker, Brock Purdy, Christian Watson, Chris Olave. I think whenever you look at those guys, they might be at plus odds. They might not be the favorites, but Garrett Wilson had a good season, but he's also had some down games, just like every single other player in this Offensive Rookie of the Year race. So what are you thinking, Dylan? Do you think the odds-on favorite of Garrett Wilson comes in, or do you think that one of these guys at around plus 500, plus 700, plus 1,000 are able to get in here and take this award?
I like Kenneth Walker and Brock Purdy a lot. Like, I'm cool with either of those. I think Garrett Wilson was obviously great, but I think they're getting taken away too much here by the numbers because he got 1,000 yards. But the fact what Brock Purdy's been able to come in and do after being a literal last pick in a draft, I think something. I think it's just maybe too short of a time frame for him to actually be able to pull in the award. But Kenneth Walker's really been like, you talk about Saquon being the anchor of the Giants. I think Kenneth Walker's been that way for the Seahawks.
Absolutely.
So, I personally would lean towards one of those two, preferably probably Kenneth Walker, but I'm cool with Garrett Wilson, obviously. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might might sprinkle a little bit of cash on Kenneth Walker as well. He's at plus 450 right now. So, like $10, you come away with a decent amount of money. And, I think that that's really intriguing because I think Kenneth Walker had a phenomenal season. I was talking about him at the beginning of the year saying this guy's going to get his chance. And he definitely did. I just can't help but think, if an ACL injury wouldn't have happened, maybe we're talking about a different Jet at the head of Offensive Rookie of the Year with Breece Hall. So, all I can say, good job to the Jets, man. Great draft this year. You're able to get probably the number one rookie wide receiver, the number one rookie running back, and, the number one rookie defensive player. So, good draft to the Jets. And we knew that coming out of the draft as well. But let's move on to the three big kids, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, and the MVP. Let's talk about Defensive Player of the Year first. You've got Nick Bosa at minus 1,100. Definitely the odds-on favorite here. Second place, Micah Parsons at plus 600. And then Myles Garrett and Max Crosby and Chris Jones all tied at plus 10,000. So what are you thinking here, Dylan? Do you think Nick Bosa takes this one? Or do you think we could see a little bit of a sneaky play with Micah Parsons or one of these other guys who are definitely not favorites to win the award taking it?
Yeah, I think it's Nick Bosa's award. I think it's been long overdue, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. He's definitely deserved it for a while. He's a great player. And I think he definitely takes it. I think Micah Parsons is going to continue to climb up that tree and get closer and closer every single year until he can eventually take it. I think if Micah doesn't slow down at this end of the season like he really has the last 5 or 6 games, I think you're looking at a different case. But Nick Bosa, I think, definitely deserves the award this year and possibly for the next couple of years to come. So let's move on. Offensive Player of the Year. This is going to be close because we got a lot of wide receivers that definitely deserve it. And then you've got your quarterbacks, of course. So your odds-on favorite right now is Jay Jetta's Justin Jefferson at minus 800. Then you've got Tyreek Hill coming up at plus 1,400. His old teammate, Patrick Mahomes, coming up at 1,600. And then Jalen Hurts at 1,800. The rest of these are kind of, obsolete, but those are the odds-on first 4 favorites. Dylan, what are you thinking here? Do you think Justin Jefferson takes it? Or do you think Tyreek could slip in there, another really great wide receiver?
I think Justin Jefferson does take it, but only because Jamar Chase missed 5 games.
I think that's definitely true. Both, Jamar had a couple games where he was kind of down to earth, not being Jamar, but so did Jefferson. Both of those guys had some very abnormal games, and I think it would have been really close if Jamar Chase did not miss those 5 games. And I know my fantasy team hurt from him missing those 5 games, but it might have hurt his chances at the award too. I think that Justin Jefferson takes this, but I might put a couple dollars down on Tyreek Hill at plus 1,400. He's the reason why the Dolphins are the way they are, and that's not that's not a slide on Tua. That's not a slide on any of the quarterbacks. It's not a slide on the coaching. Tyreek Hill has really proven that he is an elite wide receiver, and he was not dependent on quarterback play, which I think was a big time argument coming into the season. But I do think Jay Jettis takes first of, I'm going to say, many Offensive Player of the Year awards for him. I think that he's got a great career ahead of him, and just in his second and third season, I mean, this guy, he's a killer. He really is. And then finally, let's move on. Last award, Dylan, before we even look at this, who are you thinking for MVP?
Mahomes. Thank God he's not getting the LeBron treatment where LeBron should have won it for like 10 straight years and didn't. So
that's the truth.
Thank God. So yeah, I think Jalen Hurts getting hurt like really solidified this, but
I think so too.
Joe Burrow didn't even have a chance to solidify it against the Bills and have a chance at the number 1 seed. Otherwise, I think he would be a name in this. But definitely Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not mad at that whatsoever.
Yeah, for sure. Your top 4, you mentioned all of them except for Josh Allen, with Patrick Mahomes at plus 400. So you're still getting very good plus odds if you bet on Patrick Mahomes. This is a really close race according to the sports books at BetMGM. But you've got Patrick Mahomes at plus 400, Josh Allen at plus 550, Jalen Hurts at plus 650, Joe Burrow at plus 900. And then do you want to take a guess at who is number 5 in MVP right now at plus 1,000?
Tyreek Hill?
No, it's a quarterback, and it is Mr. Irrelevant. Brock Purdy is at 5th place at plus 1,000. Wow. Has not lost a game the entire time he's been a starter or whenever he's come in because of injury. So, I guess that's good enough to put you at number 5. So, right. Good for him. Good for Brock Purdy getting in there at the MVP odds. But yeah, I also think Patrick Mahomes is going to take this one. Definitely deserves it. He's had a phenomenal season. You look at his receiving room and you're like, wow, he really did that with this receiving room, didn't he? You look at it and he's got Kelsey, and then it's like Juju, and you're like, how good is Juju really? McCole Hardman. How good is McCole Hardman really? MVS. He's been basically gone this whole season. Like Patrick Mahomes has done this with players that you would have never expected him to put up these numbers with. I mean, we were talking Kansas City may be one of the worst teams in their division at the beginning of the season because of the lack of weapons and lack of defense, and here they come, number 1 seed in the AFC. So, Patrick Mahomes, I think he is the definitive MVP. But let's talk about playoffs, baby. Are you ready to jump into some of these games, some of these spreads, picking some winners, picking some losers, running some brackets, and getting on? Are you ready, Mr. Dylan Lowe?
Let's go.
Let's do it. First game, Saturday at 3:35 p.m. my time, 4:35 p.m. your time. We've got the Seattle Seahawks, Geno Smith, comeback player of the year, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett taking on the all-star 49ers at San Francisco, Mr. Irrelevant, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, and, of course, Deebo Samuel going against each other. What do you think here, Dylan? Do you think Seattle is a one and done, or do you think they stand a chance against one of the most formidable teams in the NFL?
What's the spread?
The spread is 5.5. Or no, sorry, wrong spread. 9.5. San Francisco favored by 9.5 points.
I'm taking the Seahawks to cover that all day long.
Absolutely.
I think they have a chance to win.
Whoa. Really?
I don't think they do, but I think they definitely cover, and I think there's a real chance that they win this game. So
wow.
Same thing last week by the Titans.
That's true. So you really think that there is a chance that that these guys could so explain to me right now why you think that the Seattle team can take it to that San Francisco defense.
Because I think, one, it's a divisional opponent. You've seen them twice this year.
That's true.
There's that. And then it's like, in my opinion, the best way to beat a team in the NFL, if you can, is to beat them at their own game. And the 49ers game is obviously to run the football. You do that with Kenneth Walker effectively, open up the play action, hit Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf 1 or 2 times. Dude, I mean, I think it's there. Just
and then the stars.
Two good corners. Tariq Woolen, we rave about him all the time. And then you obviously have Kobe Bryant, who's another rookie who's played pretty decent this year.
Yes.
Andre Diggs back there. I think they have like a lot of pieces to be able to contain this 49ers offense and effectively run the football on this 49ers defense. So I think there's a real chance. I mean, it's a divisional opponent. And like, I wouldn't be totally shocked like most people will if the Seahawks do win this. But I'm definitely taking them to cover that.
Yeah, I would definitely take them to cover 9.5. I think that's way too much. And I'm going to say something here, Dylan. Can I say something that's going to be blasphemous, possibly?
Go ahead.
I think that Brandon Ayuk is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel is. I think that Deebo Samuel is a better variety piece. I think he's a better, tool to be able to use on the offensive end. But I think that Brandon Ayuk is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel is, and he should be that first read on a lot of plays. Because I think that he has legitimate star power, Brandon Ayuk does.
That's fair.
And I think that if you can stop him, that passing game's really gonna close down, because George Kittle has not been that pass catching tight end that we've known him to be for all these years so far. And Deebo has struggled a lot in the passing game. He's done pretty good whenever he's been used as that kind of tool player, but whenever it really comes to the passing game, he's been overshadowed and he's been injured the last few weeks. So I think going into this game, it's going to be interesting for San Francisco and Seattle, but man, I just cannot go against San Francisco right now. They're Super Bowl favorite for a reason, and their offense, as much as you can slow it down, it just depends on if you can pick apart that defense. And I think that is way easier said than done. They've got a phenomenal interior defensive line. They've got great corners, great linebackers. I think that, you look at this team and it comes down to their defense, and that's why they've stayed in so many games. And I think just like we've seen so far this season, I think San Francisco takes down Seattle whenever it matters here in the playoffs at San Fran.
I like it.
He likes it. So let's move on to our next game, the Saturday night game, which is going to be, I think, one of the more intriguing games of the playoffs. I think there are 2, maybe 3 games that are going to be super, super close. I think this is going to be one of them, and that is the Chargers and the Jaguars. Chargers are favored by 2.5 points going into Jacksonville, but I think this is going to be a much closer game than a lot of people are thinking. Dylan, what are you thinking here? LA heading to Jacksonville. Jaguars been really hard to beat at home. Do you think that they have that fire lit under them and Doug Peterson carries this team to a win? Or do you think the Chargers come in and take care of business?
I think it'll be a close game for the majority of the game. I think it could go into the fourth quarter being like a 3-point game, but I think the Chargers ultimately win by 10 points. I think, it's going to be closer for the better part of the game, but I'm taking the Chargers to cover here.
Whenever you look at it, these are 2 teams that are having their first playoff games. Justin Herbert never played in the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence, of course, never played in the playoffs before. And, I'm not sure if I want to touch the spread too much. I think it'll probably be a 3-point win, 4-point win. And I think the Chargers do come away with the win, even though Jacksonville has been so solid at home. But the bet that I'm going to be making is give me the under in this game. Because here's the thing about these 2 teams is that the Chargers have one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL, if not the worst rush defense in the NFL. That's going to take the ball out of Trevor Lawrence's hands quite a lot. We've seen that Jacksonville wants to run with both of their running backs, both Travis Etienne and what's the other running back at Jacksonville's name?
JaMycal Hasty.
Yeah, there you go, JaMycal Hasty. They like to run with both of those guys, and they're going to be able to do that effectively against the Chargers. And I think, Chargers are going to be leaning a lot on Eckler this week with no Mike Williams. So I could really see this game going under 47.5, but I think that it's going to be a really close game. I really like both of these teams going in. I think if you're looking for a lower seed that can make a run, it's going to be one of these 2 teams. I think that, either one of these guys could really make a run in this playoffs, even though, Jesus Christ, something just fell off my shelf. Even though that scared the piss out of me. I'm sorry. Even though both of these teams are young, I think that they're both hungry, and I think they have a lot of upside. So if you're looking for a team that can maybe make a deeper run into the playoffs, look no further than these two. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Same. Agreed.
Yeah, these guys both very electric teams, but I'm going to take the Chargers here. You're going to take the Chargers. So we've got the 5 seed taking out the 4 seed there in that matchup. So a little bit of an underdog victory there. Let's move on to Sunday afternoon, of course. We have the electric Miami Dolphins with Skylar Thompson and Jeff Wilson Jr. taking on the Buffalo Bills. This isn't even going to be a game. The Bills are going to run through the Dolphins.
I agree. I'm taking the Bills here.
Yeah, the Bills, I don't know about covering. It's a 13-point spread. I don't like spreads that are that big, but honestly, I could see him winning by 2 or 3 touchdowns. I don't think this game's going to be a contest. Agreed. I mean, you look at the Seattle team that the Dolphins team that barely put up 9 points last week against a much inferior team, and this is the Bills. This is playoff Josh Allen we're talking about. This is Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and all these guys that we're talking about. This is going to be not even a contest. The Bills take this one handily.
Right.
Let's move on. Afternoon game between the Giants and the Vikings. This is another game I feel could go either way. I feel like both of these teams have a lot to prove, and I think that we've really seen 2 different stories from these guys. We've seen the Vikings, who had an incredible start to the season and have fallen off at the end, and you have the Giants, who had a kind of mediocre start but really found their pace at the end of the season with the run and pass attack with Daniel Jones. So this game could go either way. It's at Minnesota. I think your big question is, can you get Kirk Cousins out of a rhythm? And I think if you're the Giants, I think you can. But I'm going to take the Minnesota Vikings here. And I think that the reason I'm going to take the Vikings here is, they've played this team before. They've beaten this team before this year. And I think that Justin Jefferson is going to show you why he is Offensive Player of the Year in this game. I think he's going to have a great game. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a good game. I think the Vikings are going to lose whenever you take Kirk Cousins out of a dome. And I think that's what happens next week. But I think the Vikings hang on and take out the New York Giants this week.
I'm actually going to go with the Giants here.
There you go.
Vikings have shown me way, way, way too much vulnerability this year. I think it's setting them up for failure in the first round of the playoffs. I really believe that. I think this has looked like a first-round exit team all year, and people just don't. Their record is like lying, bro. Like, that is not. So I'm going to take the Giants here. What's the spread?
The spread is 3. So it's a very, very close spread. I wouldn't touch it because it's a field goal, and I feel like the winner could come from a field goal. So
right. Yeah, I'll probably just take Giants money line though at this point.
Yeah, I would definitely think about that too. You're getting plus 140, so you're still getting plus odds. But yeah, like the Giants in this game, like the Vikings in this game, I think that it's really going to come down to just if you can get Kirk Cousins out of his rhythm. And I think that they can. I legitimately think that is a chance. Because the Giants have had a pretty solid defense. And, one of these teams is going to come in more fired up than the other. And I think we all know which team's going to come more fired up. And it's the one with nothing to lose, Brian Daboll and the New York Giants. So it's going to be a close game. I'm going to go Vikings here. You're going to go Giants. And we'll look at kind of what that does to the different matchups. But let's move on to our big-time game of the week. We've got the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Tyler Huntley will probably play, but I don't think it matters. This is a 9.5-point spread. I think the Bengals take care of business here against the Ravens. No questions asked. If Lamar Jackson was playing, I think this would be a much closer game. But with no Lamar Jackson and this game taking place at Cincinnati, give me the Bengals.
I'm going to take the Bengals covering.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's going to be a really interesting game. And, if we have the Bengals winning, that's going to set up a heck of a matchup in the first round between the Chargers and the Chiefs in the first round, which is going to be crazy. And then, of course, we'll have Bills and Bengals, the matchup we didn't get to see last year in the playoffs. So AFC is going to be crazy if those are the 4 teams that make it into the next round. But let's talk about our last two teams, or our last team to make it in here for the NFC, between the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Can the Cowboys take down Tom Brady for the first time? Dylan, please give me some good news.
I like the Cowboys to win.
Yeah.
I've been, not giving us confidence is kind of just so that I won't be disappointed or as disappointed on Monday, but I like the Cowboys to win this game. You can sit there and say, oh, it's like, Tom Brady can give a Super Bowl run at any given time with any given team. It's like, I was saying that pretty much all regular season, but I think that team is legitimately not good. So, I think we're not blowing them out. Tom Brady will hang in there and has a real chance to win this game, yes, but I'm taking the Cowboys. I'm just going to go money line here. I don't care what the spread is. I'm just going to go Cowboys money line.
Yeah, spread is 2.5. Don't like that spread at all. It's always dangerous to bet on something that close. But,
right.
I think if there's a team, and I'm going to say this with sincerity, non-bias, nothing like that. If there is a team that is going to make a run in this playoffs at a lower seed, it's going to be the Dallas Cowboys. Because here's the thing. The Dallas Cowboys have showed a lot of things this season. They've shown that they are vulnerable, and they've shown that there are times where they can look like a terrible NFL team. But they've also shown flashes that they can be a Super Bowl winning team. They have. If that defense is firing and that offense is firing, this team can make a run. And I think it wholly depends on and I know this is big, if Mike McCarthy can get these guys fired up. If Mike McCarthy can get these guys fired up and ready to play and put their season on the line, this Dallas Cowboys team can make a run. But if he can't, and these Cowboys cannot rally behind Mike McCarthy, number one, he needs to go. And number two, they're not going to beat the Buccaneers.
Yeah,
and I think you've got to stick to your strengths if you're the Cowboys.
Exactly, and the biggest strength on that defense in particular, maybe the whole team, is that defensive line. Getting Jonathan Hankins back will help in the run game, but Micah Parsons and Marcus Lawrence, eerily quiet. I feel like they're both due, and that's honestly good news for us because best way to beat Tom Brady is to get after him. So that's what we do. So,
and that is a demolished offensive line. So
yep. So the blueprint is pretty easy. It's laid out. Just go execute, and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely.
So,
and
here.
What'd you say?
I'm going to give us some hope here.
Hey, I'm going to take that hope and I'm going to raise you that I think the Dallas Cowboys take this game against the Buccaneers at Tampa Bay. I think this is Tom Brady's last game in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers uniform. Don't think it's his last game in the NFL, but I do think it's his last game in a Buccaneers uniform. And I think that if the Cowboys can stick to their guns and use the run effectively to open up the pass, which is what the Cowboys do if they win. They use Zeke and they use Pollard and they open up that pass game. I think if they do that and just don't try to feed everything through Dak Prescott, I think that the Dallas Cowboys take out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. We've seen the Buccaneers get roasted. We've seen them lose games that they shouldn't have lost, and we haven't really seen them win games that they shouldn't have won. So give me the Cowboys to walk into Tampa Bay, take out the Buccaneers, and go into the next round of the playoffs. So let's talk about what that next round looks like, and then that'll be it for the Bearded Podcast. Let's talk about that next round. With the way we predicted things in the AFC, we have the 1 seed, Kansas City Chiefs, taking on the 5 seed, LA Chargers, which is going to be a fun divisional matchup between those two teams. And then we've got the 2 versus the 3 seed, the Buffalo Bills, with the rematch against the Cincinnati Bengals. And hopefully nothing catastrophic happens whenever we see those teams go, because it's going to be fireworks. It really will be fireworks. And then on the NFC side, it depends on who you have winning the Vikings and the Giants game. If the Giants win, like I say, like Dylan says, then the Cowboys would be playing the 49ers in the second round. And if the Vikings win, the Cowboys would be taking against the Eagles in the second round. So it depends on what you're thinking there. Either way, tough matchup in the NFC for either of those two teams. I think that there's a definitive possibility that we see the Eagles and the 49ers in the next round. But nonetheless, that's going to do it for the Bearded Podcast. Enjoy your playoff football. Eat some wings, drink some beverages, have a good time with the playoffs, because if you're not enjoying it, then what is the purpose? Football is here. Playoffs are here. It's all on the line, and that's going to do it for the Bearded Podcast. I'm Jordan Crouton Moore. You can follow me everywhere at Crouton ASU. You can go follow this guy everywhere at the Bearded Pod. Playoffs are starting up, so more posts are going to be rolling in throughout the weekend, I am sure. Dylan, is there anything else you want to say before we head out for today?
We could look like a bunch of clowns next week, depending on this Cowboys game. So hopefully,
don't we always look like a bunch of clowns? Isn't that the joys of the Bearded Podcast, that we just come on here and look like idiots?
Yep.
Nonetheless, it's great to see you again, Dylan. Always great talking to you, and we will catch you guys next week with some more Bearded Podcast.